Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, August 14th, 2019. We are on a live show today. This may end up being our last live show of the week. It may end up being the last show ever. I guess anything could happen, right? Nothing indicates that would be the case, but who knows? Anyway, we have a bit of a wild and crazy week developing as we get ready to send the first off to college, which actually means us bringing him there. So it's not really so much of a send-off as really a hand delivery, I guess, more than anything else. So big day, and it's not happening today, but tomorrow, the last day beforehand, we got not only the construction going on, which I warned you about last week, but last minute running around to gather all the things that we've forgotten to get for the event, which we have seen on the horizon now for, well, I guess like 18 years we've been saying this would eventually come. So plenty to do tomorrow, and too much noise to do it over tomorrow as well. Friday, of course, actual departure day. Will we be back in place by Monday? That I'm not sure. We still have another here at home with us who has another week or so to go before reporting back to school, who would like a little time doing some fun stuff possibly over the one last weekend. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what happens. It's a very, very tough situation. Oh, I almost forgot about that one. All right, well, Donald Trump is still president. Yeah, dang. Every once in a while that still occurs to me. All right, Daily Co's Radio is live now. Bill tells me that's how I know it's true. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, finds dead air to be a very tough situation. Very tough. Oh, thank you. You reminded me, too. We'll see what happens, but I'm sure it'll work out. I hope it works out for everybody, including the dead air, by the way. That is a hearkening back to maybe just one of the, in all of the stupid things that are going on, one of the more amazing situations. The President of the United States, the purported President of the United States, has no earthly clue what's going on in the world and what to do about it. He gave a statement yesterday. I guess he must have been on his way to the helicopter to fly him from golf vacation to political event. I guess it wasn't a rally yesterday. It was a speech at a plastics plant of some kind, and Daniel Dale covered it. And I guess we might spend some time taking a look at what Daniel Dale said he said, because he's a very dumb guy. And not Daniel Dale, he's a very smart guy. The president is a very dumb guy, and it's always entertaining to a certain extent to read transcripts of the things he said and of his speeches. It was a stupid, rambling one. More to talk about there at some point. But the thing that really stuck with me here was a quote captured, in this case, with video from MSNBC, in which he's asked about what's going on in China and Hong Kong. Huge protests in Hong Kong. We haven't covered them much. We've mentioned them because they're happening and they're huge worldwide events. And by the way, almost all the top of my worldwide trending list on Twitter, it appears to be in Chinese characters. So I assume, I can't tell the difference between the various Asian language characters sometimes. It doesn't look like Korean. I guess it could be Japanese, but it looks like it might be Chinese. It's probably happening because of these protests. Anyway, it's a huge and complex and complicated situation, which I'm making sound very simplistic and stupid because I don't know anything about it. Worse, neither does the President of the United States. If it were my job to know about it, I'd know about it. It's his job, but nonetheless, he knows nothing about it. But he says, this is what strikes me. This is something he says about everything. He literally knows nothing about anything happening anywhere in this country or around the world. And he gives the same stock answer to everything. Reporters, what are they going to do? They're going to ask the questions. They're going to film the answer. They're going to put it out there. I don't know if it requires that reporters make any special observation, but people who are observing from, a 50,000 foot level, like Daniel Dale, saying these are the trends of how he handles himself. are saying things like this. So he's asked, what about Hong Kong? Basically, I don't know what the question is. We had the audio, but who cares? The question is, what about Hong Kong? What's going on? It's a major I guess what you would call pro-democracy demonstration going on for days there, worrying about a crackdown from mainland Chinese government, which, of course, now holds sway in Hong Kong. But he says, this is his comment on it. Should we, I guess we could play the audio. But the president says, the Hong Kong thing is a very tough situation. Very tough. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. That's it. I mean, there's more, which is equally dumb, but that's his go-to line about everything, right? You know, the world is on fire. There's a nuclear war going on. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, but I'm sure it will work out. I hope it works out for everybody, including China, by the way, which is, of course, the country where this is happening. So, come on. Of course, you hope it works out for them, but I mean, it means nothing, right? I don't know what's going on. I don't know which side to be on. Pro-democracy, anti-democracy, beautiful chocolate cake. President Xi and I are such good friends. We're so close. I'm not, so this is all he has to say about it. It's a tough situation. How tough? Very tough. What'll happen? Well, we'll see what happens. I know we'll see what happens. I have eyes. I know, but we're supposed to maybe be a part of the outcome here, or have an opinion about what should happen, or offer some advice. And I mean, it is interesting. He has a certain point in that, okay, there ought to be some humility here. We can't always be tell China exactly what to do, but we can certainly express a preference, but not if you don't know anything about what's going on there, I guess. So very tough. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it'll work out. And that's interesting too. So that's a very optimistic view of things. And then he hedges it. I hope it'll work out. Well, I hope it works out for everybody, including China, by the way, because China is something. Beautiful cake. But he says this about anything, and he's said about so many things, and I began to speculate that, that he might say that about any situation, even an obvious emergency. My pants are on fire. Well, it's a very tough situation. We'll see what happens. I hope it'll work out for everyone, including the pants, by the way. The depth of, I don't know, I guess depravity, I suppose, of a certain kind, it's just really disturbing and makes it difficult to do things like tell kids that they ought to go get educations. Because what's the point? You can just stand there and say, well, algebra is a very tough situation, very tough. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it'll work out. I hope it works out for everybody, including me on my test, by the way. And that should be enough to get them through school and onto the presidency, I suppose. Many other things happening, including actual happenings in Hong Kong. We'll get to that. I just felt like it was important to say the president is woefully unprepared and unqualified for the job. And eventually it's going to come out and the world is going to be upset and bad things are going to happen. The fact that he's up for re-election, astounding enough as it is. And, the world at this point knows it's a national security problem. We're ripe for attack. Everyone determined to attack in U.S. now. And the president will have no idea because he wouldn't read the briefing on it anyway. He would have no idea what to do. He'd golf. I'll stay here on the golf course. Their troops will never find me here. I have a feeling that would be his response to things. Can I put golf in the bunker that we hide in? Anyway, you all know he's stupid. Let's talk to someone who's smart. Greg Dworkin is here. Hi, good morning, Greg. You have some news about the rest of the world.
How do you know I'm smart? I mean, how do you know?
Well, I'm comparing you to Donald Trump. How do you feel about that?
Well, how do you feel about this rock?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think you come out better by comparison.
Let's compare them.
You mean Trump and the Rock?
Yeah, I mean, right. The Rock stays true,
not the wrestler.
And it keeps, grounded, and it doesn't change all that much. And it's got lichen growing on it.
True.
Well, Trump isn't grounded. He changes all the time, and he's got lichen growing on his head. So I guess there's that familiarity there. But,
yeah.
Hong Kong is really complicated, and I don't purport or pretend to understand it. But luckily, there's Vox, so I saw a Vox-planer on it on YouTube.
Oh, all right. Well, good.
So I stayed in a Holiday Inn or whatever.
Right.
So, the deal, as I understand it, is this, and it's actually kind of interesting and brings up nuance. Which is why we're so screwed with Trump as president.
Yeah.
So we have these relationships with China, and right now we happen to be in the middle of a trade war, and it's not going well, and the Dow futures are down 311 points.
Easy to win, though.
And the bond inversion yield curve suggests that there's a recession looming, whatever that means. And people are bearish about what's going on in terms of the economy. And by the first quarter of next year, we might be seeing some very bad news. And some of that has to do with Trump's China trade war. So that's a background.
Yeah. All right.
That's a background. So this couple in Hong Kong goes over to Taiwan.
They did. All right.
And only one of them comes back.
Oh.
Because apparently the guy murdered his pregnant girlfriend.
Oh.
Well, the problem is they're in Hong Kong, and according to their laws, the Hong Kong authorities can't charge him for murder because he did it in Taiwan. And there's no extradition laws, so they can't send him back to Taiwan where he could be charged there. That's a problem.
Yes.
So the Hong Kong authorities talked about, well, maybe we need some extradition treaties or laws so that things like this can't happen.
Yeah.
So far, so good, right? The problem is
minus the murder.
that if you're going to do extradition treaties to Taiwan, you also wind up with extradition treaties to mainland China. That's what got people so upset.
Oh, that is interesting.
So if you're going to now have extradition to China, then what else is going to happen that's going to be basically Chinese law and not Hong Kong law, because they had been different because, Hong Kong had been a colony of Britain for so long.
Right.
And so they see encroaching authoritarianism from China now beginning to hit Hong Kong law. And their promised semi-independence seems to be something of an illusion. So they get upset.
Yes. Okay.
And they start to protest. And the
right.
protest grows. And for the moment, this is from people on the ground in Hong Kong, not me. I don't understand this stuff the way they do. It would be helpful to speak, Mandarin and Cantonese and understand some of this. But so far, the protesters have been very well organized in a very well organized city, I might add. That runs way better than New York.
Really?
And, they have the sympathy of the locals. And the locals include a lot of the Chinese equivalent of burghers and, oligarchs, because it's a fairly wealthy city. Yet the protesters have their sympathy for now. Then one of the problems is the riot police came in, they shot out a girl's eye. Now all the protesters are wearing eye patches. That's why you see that if you see little clips that don't explain that. And then they decided to make their protest a little bit more visual. And they did two things that put their protests in even more at-risk situation from a crackdown from the Chinese government. One is that they were holding a lot of American flags, which I think Kevin McCarthy foolishly said, that's a great idea. So now China gets to say it's foreign agitators.
Oh,
bad move by opening his mouth, and that's why nuance matters. And the other thing is they tried to shut down the airport.
Yes, this is what I get to see.
But by shutting down the airport, you hit commerce. And by hitting commerce, you run the risk of losing the support of the wealthier part of the population that had been supporting you. So all of that is going on all at the same time. And I don't mean to make it sound like I understand all the nuance here, but it's nuanced. Even my superficial reading of the situation is nuanced. So when you have a president who doesn't do nuance, we're screwed.
Yes. I don't know whether it would have been a better answer to say, I really don't know what's going on there. I have to study it. I don't think that would have been much better. But
there's a lot going on, and we're monitoring closely. It's about the best you can do. Now, there are people who are urging him to support democracy, but that runs a risk of making things a lot worse.
Oh.
So somebody who doesn't know what's going on and keeps saying platitudes but nothing else actually might be the best approach. This is the one situation where his being an idiot may actually help.
That could be true.
That's what I mean by nuance.
Yeah, well, that is nuanced, and I guess my big complaint is that his platitude is so dumb. The thing about platitudes is it's supposed to be inoffensive,
Even platitudes have to be nuanced. It would help if you have a foreign policy establishment that can help you on these things, but he's decimated them.
Yeah, that's true.
It would help if you had intelligence community that could give you information that would help you on that, but he doesn't believe them, even if he hasn't decimated them yet, even though he's trying.
Yeah.
And it's not likely that his daily briefings are going to help him on this because he doesn't pay attention and they're not cartoony enough.
Yeah. So he's not going to get any better. I guess my main objection is, we'll see what happens. I know we will. That's not even a thing that is. I don't know. That's not even platitude.
But it's even worse than that.
Okay. Well,
and the reason is because in the past he said, "Oh, Tiananmen Square, that was like not good, but wow, that was really strong on the part of China. What strength, right? So when he says we'll see what happens, it makes it sound like."
I don't care, for one thing.
No, it's worse than that. It makes it sound like he's eating popcorn, watching Demolition Derby and enjoying it, or Worldwide Wrestling, and loves it when everybody riots and, hits each other on the head with chairs.
Yeah, I hope they use sticks.
Wow, look at that power. And right now there are not just intelligence community hints and portents, but also video that's been put on YouTube of Chinese forces massing right outside of Hong Kong, 100 miles away, just in case they need to go in there and crack down, which, by the way, would be terrible for the world. So the question on the table is, how does the United States support these protests without making the situation worse and encouraging a crackdown?
We'll see.
That takes talent, and we ain't got that in the White House. That's my concern and fear. And by the way, that's just Hong Kong. We got Russia demonstrations at the same time doing the same thing in terms of, wanting to encourage them without making it worse. And we got no nuance in the White House and somebody who's on Putin's side, let alone all the stuff that's happening in Europe and places like Italy, who may have, a track for going full fascist if this government falls. And again, no expertise, no nuance.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
I hope it works out for Europe.
Domestically, we have the stock futures dropping.
Hope that works out.
Recession looming. And, Ken Cuccinelli thinking that the Statue of Liberty only applies to white Europe.
I hope it works out for statues.
And I hope it works out for Cuccinelli, too. So all of that's happening. And again, if it feels like really bad, if you have that pit in your stomach that things can get worse, that's why.
Yeah. Well, it'll get...
On the bright side, Trump isn't doing so well in the polls.
Okay. Well, I hope it works out for everyone.
So we'll see what happens. I hope it works out and he can stave off disaster until next year. When we can put somebody else in the White House who actually knows what they're doing.
We'll see. By the way, that's a great way of doing polling. I'm just going to open it. We'll see what happens, polling agency. How are they doing? What's
maybe it'll work
snapshot?
out is their competitor.
We'll see what happens. I hope it'll work out for the entire field.
Oh, that's what happened when they merged.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. I think we should just run everything that way. So
all right. So you can sleep at night. Does that make you feel better?
Sure. This way, why worry? We'll see what happens. You'll have a front row seat.
Yeah, except Mad is folding, so you can't even have that anymore.
I hope it works out for the magazine.
Yeah. Well, you made Clip, didn't you? So now you're not qualified to even talk about that.
All right. Well, okay. Meanwhile. Let's talk about what's coming up here. And we'll see what happens.
I'm having this usual discussion with people who get upset that polls exist. The polls are not particularly good for Trump. To say that is a snapshot in time. It's not a prediction. So if you say the polls are not particularly good for Trump, oh my gosh, all you people are saying he's doomed. Why are you saying that? Don't say that.
No, we'll see
what
happens.
No, I didn't say he's doomed. I just said the polls right now aren't good for him.
Right. Well, just like we used to say, we have to wait and see. We're just not saying that we have to wait, but we will
we'll
see.
Just see how it works out. The thing is that, these are not predictions. They are snapshots. But let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. Right? There's, of all places, The Hill actually had a pretty decent summary.
What? Why?
I don't know. Okay. Niall Stanage had a column here, The Memo, Suburbs Spell Trouble for Trump. And what it says here is that Trump has a problem with suburban voters, and it could have profound consequences for his chances of re-election next year. Makes some good points here that I want to highlight. An NBC News analysis Monday noted that Trump, I think we talked about this on the air, Monday noted that Trump has been underwater with suburban voters in 5 out of 6 NBC News Wall Street Journal polls conducted this year.
Yes.
You know, with the caveat and reminder that he was underwater in a lot of places in 2016 one anyway. He didn't get 50%. But this year it's actually a whole lot worse than it was then. That finding comports with other surveys that show Trump performing poorly with some of the key voting blocs that populate the nation's suburbs, notably white women and white college graduates. These dynamics make Trump's path to re-election a steep one, experts say. Long way off, says Terry Madonna, who does Franklin and Marshall. And he says the margins were so narrow that any shift in the suburbs could swing those states back into the Democratic column. We're talking about, of course, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And then here's the part I would highlight and bold verbally, because we're doing it on radio. Even if Trump were to retain the enthusiasm of his base.
Oh, my gosh.
Enthusiasms.
They were ready. All right.
See, the thing is, his base isn't big enough to win. So racism, outward, clear, bullhorn racism does retain the enthusiasm of his base. That's all he's got. But for everybody else, not so much. Patrick Murray, director of the Monmouth poll, says the movement in the suburbs means, quote, there are a number of places where it'll simply boost the Democratic share of the vote. In places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, that could be critical.
Yes.
You know, crucial Waukesha County. You know what I'm talking about here?
Right, yes. We'll see what happens.
Most Republican strategists acknowledge the problem exists, but there are divergent opinions as to its cause. Well, if you're saying that it's true, and Republicans and Democrats agree that it's true, I would argue that makes Trump not the favorite. Republican strategists can argue about why, but they're not arguing about whether. You know, it's just he's not doing well. Some argue there had been a gradual move away from the GOP among suburban voters even before Trump. That's probably true.
Okay.
He accelerated that. And the consensus is that those voters, even if fiscally conservative, may have been put off by some of the more socially conservative views expressed by Republican candidates.
Maybe.
And the thing is, if you throw on top of that today's bad news about the yield curve inversion, its effect on the stock market, not that the stock market means anything other than a thermometer, it's bad news. If we do have a recession, he loses the one card he has to play.
Yes. I mean,
by the way, it's not good for America, but in terms of politically, it's not good for him.
He's put a lot of
Trump's 2016 win, a shock to many within his own party.
Yes.
They didn't expect Comey or the Russians. Well, they may have expected the Russians, but they didn't expect Comey. Looked like a rebuke to such ideas and a validation of his red meat appeal. But as re-election looms, some GOP strategists believe his style and combative approach are having a destructive effect on his chances and on the broader electoral hopes of his party. Liz Meyer. People are tired. People feel like Donald Trump's the reality TV star was fine when we had The Apprentice, a couple hours a week. Now it's 24/7, week after week. Meyer added, based on anecdotal evidence, that in their day-to-day lives, a lot of suburban women feel they have quite a lot piled on and they just don't need the extra daily dose of daily drama that Trump injects. In other words, it's the women, not the men.
Okay.
Trump loyalists say it's unfair.
The drama men?
Yeah. And in the most recent NBC News Wall Street Journal poll conducted last month, he was 3 points underwater with suburban voters as a whole. And nobody expects Trump to change. His best chance, according to some GOP strategists, is to hope for an equally unpalatable Democratic opponent. That's why he's trashing them every time he gets the chance. But one thing's for sure, virtually everyone is in agreement the suburbs will be a crucial battleground. You can't rule out the pivotal role the suburbs are likely to play, says Terry Madonna, Franklin and Marshall, Pennsylvania, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a pretty good setup to where we're at. After the break, we'll talk about Texas in particular. And how people are reacting in the suburbs there. But again, this isn't to say Trump is doomed. It isn't to say that Trump is guaranteed to lose. But the fact of the matter is he's not the favorite and he's got headwinds.
Okay. That's according to Franklin and Marshall, and also everybody else.
And also everybody else. It's just interesting to hear the GOP acknowledge this, even if they won't do it openly.
Yes. Well, okay, but there weren't that many people, I guess, willing to attach their names to that. Were there other sources besides Mayer?
There's Liz Meyer, who's the Republican strategist. There are the pollsters who were neutral who were saying it, and then everybody else in the GOP whispers because they don't want Trump mad at them.
Okay.
Because they want to work, If Trump gets mad at them, they don't have a job.
Right. That's a pretty significant problem for them. Okay. Well, all right. I don't know what else to say about that except, okay, I'm glad people are acknowledging it. It's good that things are happening this way. Armando is sending us a note. We must be wrong about something.
Yeah, because the betting sites still have Trump the favorite, but, the betting sites really stink.
Well, we'll see what happens, I guess, with the betting sites. Bovada? I don't even know that one.
I don't know that one either. I have to go back and look at OddsMaker and look at the totality of all the sites and see what they have to
I
say.
wasn't aware that Franklin and Marshall was a big name in polling.
Also, we have to look at and define a little bit better what it means to be the favorite. Okay, if you're 55-45, maybe you're the favorite, but that's actually a tie. Right, if you're 60-40, you're definitely the favorite.
I guess so. Well, that's not
so I have to see what those odds actually are.
Yes.
If you're 52-48, that's a tie.
Okay, 52-48. Yeah, that would be pretty close.
So we'll have to see.
Okay.
If you're talking about roughly 50-50 with him having a slight lead, that's not being the favorite.
Okay, well, I can understand that. Helpfully explaining what betting sites are now to us. He's giving us the Vox-plainer of what betting. We know what they are. I've never heard of Bovada. I don't have any reason to believe that they would predict any worse than any other betting site. It's just that I've never seen them before, so they have no track record, which might not even matter because it's a betting site, not a polling site. So, okay,
right.
We'll be right back in 2 minutes, unless you bet against us very heavily. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We figured out over the break, thanks to Armando's notes in the background, that Bovada purports to be, or at least Armando purports, that it is one of the biggest global betting sites in the world, which may very well be the case. A lot of things happen all over the internet, all over the world that we don't know much about. I've heard other names. They need a better PR firm, I guess. I hear about all the other betting sites. And, they're interesting in the sense that people back up their positions with money, but at the same time, they're playing a game and you can bet on any number of candidates. It's not like having one vote to cast, so you can hedge your bets and bet money on people that you know have no chance whatsoever. So it's a little bit of a one-off in terms of a predictive market, but it's a fun tool to look at, and I think that's probably the limit of it.
So I'm looking at just a summary of all the different betting sites. There's about 20 of them here. And this is an odds checker. And basically, Trump is just about 50-50.
Okay.
10 over 11, 5 of 6, 1, 4 or 5, just about even. 19 of 20. Just in British terms, that's pretty even.
Okay.
So if you want to press it and you want to call 53% a slight favorite, you could do that.
I think, probably.
But it's really not.
I would think that way. But yeah, okay. So close enough to be a a narrow call. And a betting site would look at things a little differently than a poll.
I look at this as basically tied, and that's been my point all along. Not that he's guaranteed. I don't even think he's the favorite, but we'll see what happens after the stock market falls. We'll see whether those odds change, because that's what's floating him.
All right. Well, it's there's also the possibility, like I say, he neglects to show at all. I forgot. Oh.
Yeah. Well, the question is whether he neglects the show for the debates because he knows he can't handle them.
Right. Well, that's
so we'll see.
Real possibility.
Meanwhile, what's happening with domestic politics here? Here's a good one from Perry Bacon over at 538. Is Trump's use of identity politics an effective strategy?
How could he be using identity politics? That's for socialists.
Okay. Well, if this is too long and you didn't read it, I'll give you the summary. We don't really know.
Oh. All right.
We don't really know is an unsatisfying answer, but I think it's an important one, says Perry Bacon. That uncertainty explains why the question of how effective Trump's stance is on issues of race and identity remains so prominent in coverage, why the two parties, particularly the Democrats, are experiencing internal friction about possible electoral strategies. Do you go after him on that and his personal characteristics? Or do you go after his incompetence, for example, in how you would handle a real crisis like Hong Kong or stock market crashing? The answer is to do both, but you can understand why some candidates might prefer the one over the other.
Yes.
And he says that debate over policy and messaging to some extent overlaps with the 2020 Democratic primary contest. Does the party choose a candidate who might appeal to Obama-Trump voters with his or her populist economic stances, like Sanders or Warren, or maybe a candidate who might appeal to the same voters by virtue of being a white man or downplaying his liberalism on these ideas of race and identity, like Joe Biden? Or does the party pick a person who might focus on mobilizing college-educated white voters and minorities and takes more liberal stances on issues of race and identity like Beto? Or should the party be worried candidates who aren't white and male like Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Warren, will be seen as embodying the diversity of the country in a way that Trump voters don't like?
Okay. I don't know.
Right?
We'll see
we
what
don't
happens.
know. Well, we're going to have to see that play out. We'll have to see how Democratic voters want to deal with that.
Yeah, all right.
On the GOP
that's
side, there's also some
end,
confusion about whether Trump's racial approach works or not. Most congressional Republicans defended Trump, but some in the party, like Will Hurd, broke with him. And a third bloc that included Susan Collins was tortured statements, because they were flummoxed about how to respond because she's troubled and worried. So, there's a lot more to play out. And again, it's really, really early. We do have a new poll from South Carolina showing Biden in a very strong place. But at the same time, the all-important, after 5 out of 10 days is done, cast your kernel vote from Iowa has the following. First of all, the Democrats and Republicans are still 50-50, which is pretty good, strong showing for the Democrats compared to usual.
Okay.
Right? Biden's at 23. Buttigieg is at 17. Warren's at 16. Harris at 11, Sanders at 8, not good position for him. Cory Booker at 4, which is good position for him, but he's tied with Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay.
And Tom Steyer's at 3, and it looks like Tom Steyer, in fact, will make the debate stage.
All right.
He'll be the 10th person in,
Colonel.
and the only other person who's on the cusp of possibly qualifying isn't Gabbard. It's Julian Castro.
Oh, okay.
So there may be 10 or 11 people, and if there are 10 or 11 people, do they have them all on stage at the same time, or do they split them?
I think they should put them on one of those moving things like the sushi restaurants.
Well, my suggestion is that they split them, and Tom Steyer is in each debate, so everybody has a chance to, beat up on him.
You think? He should be able to handle that.
Yeah, Sanders and Warren can do it for a billionaire trying to buy his way on.
Yes.
And, everybody else can do it for their own reasons.
Okay. He may be up for it. Whatever happened to the Starbucks guy? How come we're not hearing from him?
Who? Howard, whatever his name is?
I can't
don't
remember
know
what his name is.
He said he was going to stop for the summer and see what happens. And Mike Bloomberg basically is saying the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Because it's really important that billionaire populists tell us what to do.
Yeah, I guess. It's not coffee season. It's iced coffee season, so he's not... I don't know. He's just not relevant. I thought he was having some back surgery, but maybe it didn't go well. I don't know. No one knows because no one cared. And so just literally no one is asking, what did happen about that? Right. We won't see what happens.
Right. Well, I like the Iowa State Fair because it always allows me to work in the butter emails,
Yeah, everyone's enjoying
and then
those.
after 10 days, you can't do that anymore. But this is the only stretch you can actually use that.
Other state fairs ought to be able to do something like
Well,
this.
and I think they have a monopoly on butter.
Butter. Yeah, this could be their thing.
That's the the famous Iowa butter cat
Butter
who
on a
actually
stick.
answers you on Twitter if you talk to it.
Cool.
So this one is from the Los Angeles Times. In suburban Texas, it feels like there's no place for lifelong Republicans like me.
You? Who?
Vanessa Steinkamp is a kind of voter the Texas Republicans counted on. She's a devoted conservative who volunteered for Bob Dole, interned for former GOP Bill Frist, lives in an affluent suburb between Fort Worth and Dallas, and it's the reddest pocket of a reliably Republican district. And she feels alienated by her party. It feels like there's no place for lifelong Republicans like me.
That's it.
Her unease underscores a larger problem for Texas Republicans. Female suburban voters like Steinkamp are no longer a sure bet for the party, injecting new competitiveness into the Lone Star State's politics.
Okay, Lone Star.
Right, and there's
Lone Star.
right. Let's see what else we have here. We have other stories in a similar manner. Here's one from Politico. Texas Republicans brace for 2020 drubbing. Republicans need to be very
Not
concerned,
rubbing.
says a GOP member of the state's congressional delegation of next year's elections. He's talking about Will Hurd. Keir Murray, a longtime Democratic strategist in Texas, credits Trump for putting the state in play. Democrats expected the state would eventually start to move in their direction as more minorities move there, but they thought that was still 5 years away. Trump has accelerated the process.
Not of minorities moving, but of...
Remember, you have a lot of GOP lawmakers in Texas in the House retiring.
Yes.
Okay. There's Will Hurd, there's Pete Olson, Kenny Marchant, and John Carter and Chip Roy are on the list in terms of targets. So again, you see all of a concentration on the suburbs, and this all goes into the idea that Trump really does have headwinds. So I'm not buying those betting market odds at the moment, but we'll see. They fluctuate. But at best, even if you want to say, okay, they're accurate because they're as accurate as the polls right now, it's basically a tie.
Okay. Headwinds and that hair, not usually a good combination.
No, throwing stairs, and then Trump is really screwed.
All right.
Here's one. Colorado ex-governor Hickenlooper may drop presidential bid for Senate race. This is from Reuters yesterday.
Okay, good.
I would point out that at least one recent Senate general election poll has Hickenlooper with a 13-point lead over Cory Gardner from PPP polls, should he actually choose to run for the Senate instead of, wasting his time running for president. I guess the idea is he'll drop out after he finds out he didn't make the debate stage in September, and we'll see what some of the others do.
Okay.
We'll see if Tulsi goes third party. We'll see what Andrew Yang does.
Yes. I don't anticipate much from Andrew Yang, but okay. Interesting. Thanks for playing.
Yep, exactly right.
Not so much Tulsi.
And then one more thing, which I think is really important to keep in mind in terms of everything else. And this is an article from one of the local Connecticut papers. As Chris Murphy talks to Trump, Connecticut senators optimistic on gun legislation, actually cautiously optimistic would be the better term.
Oh, really?
Guarded optimism is what they use in
Sure.
the story.
Okay.
Because Murphy talked to Trump on Tuesday in a phone call and said it was a very good conversation. I am sure he's right. I am sure that Trump made really nice, optimistic noises. Of course, the problem is that whoever talks to him last is where he decides.
Yes.
But I really do think that Trump would, in theory, like to do something.
What?
Background checks, red flag laws.
He would like to. He would like to be able to say that he has done something that no other president has been able to do.
Exactly.
That's true.
He would like to do those things. Whether he'd be able to do those things is a completely different story. Partly because McConnell really doesn't want to, and Wayne LaPierre will call Trump and say, "Oh, if you do that, your base will hate you," and he'll say, "Oh my God, I can't have that. I don't have anybody else."
Yeah, unless he's seen the news about Wayne LaPierre not having any support among the base either.
No, that's not covered on Fox, so he probably hasn't seen it.
All right, well, someone ought to tell him.
So I'm not as
optimistic
as our senators, but if Murphy came out and said, I'm pessimistic, nothing's happening, as he usually does, fine. That's not what he's saying this time.
Okay, and maybe that's not what's called for at the moment. I asked you, are you sure it was Donald Trump that did this? Because Ivanka is on the case now.
Says Ivanka.
Yes, right. That's certainly should be pointed out.
That's not fair. It might have been Jared.
True.
Unnamed sources tell us
that
Ivanka's making a bunch of phone calls to people like Joe Manchin.
That's the whole bunch right there. I thought that was interesting, too. I'm calling lots of people. Yeah, like who? Joe Manchin.
Anybody else? Well, nobody on record.
Joe Manchin's assistant answered the phone. That's two
So
people.
in an interview, Dick Blumenthal said that unlike the aftermath of Sandy Hook, in which expanded background checks stalled, things may be different now. No guarantee.
No, certainly not.
And Jeremy Stein, executive director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence, which I think, if I recall correctly, don't quote me, is an umbrella group, said that although he sees Connecticut as a role model for state action on guns, we actually had the first red flag laws.
Oh, okay.
And that goes back to before 2000. It is not impervious to guns easily trafficked from other states with weaker gun laws. You're only safe as your surrounding states, which is the answer to all the gun people who say, oh, you're one of those restrictive states and people still get killed. Well, yeah.
Yes.
That's because guns come from the South and they work their way up.
Yeah. Things move over state borders. That's something you guys are really supposed to be in favor of and think is a big deal.
So the article points out the obvious. The path to enactment of new gun laws remains fraught. Republicans have their base to consider. National Sports Shooting Foundation, here based in Newtown. We have concerns for our retailers. And, of course, Walmart is stepping up to the plate and restricting video games, or at least video game advertising.
Yes, well, that's the important part. I've heard so many people blame it on the advertising for the games.
Yeah, I saw this great cartoon that somebody had done. It's a picture of one of those classic Caesar getting stabbed 23 times, and the caption is, I told you guys to stay away from video games.
Yeah, that's a little known fact about ancient Rome.
Right. Anyway, Blumenthal says we've seen this movie, but now hopefully we can break the logjam and move forward, so we shall see. So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. We need to watch the market and see what's happening.
All right. We'll see.
In fact, I'll go and look at that. It's down 408 points in the first 15 minutes, and because it opens at 9:30, it's now 9:44, and that's obviously not good. Yield curve just inverted. Recession warnings getting louder, says Barron's. We'll see. There's a lot going on, and a lot of it's going to be not so good news, and we just have to remind ourselves that, by the way, nobody's in charge.
Yeah, well, that's sort of dismaying, to say the least. Okay.
But we'll get through it. We always get through it.
Things continue to happen. Time is linear. Really not much you can do about it. So I guess, in a sense, that's the only rational policy. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
If only there was a thing that the President of the United States could do to steer the outcome of world events.
Well, here's the problem with Trump. You don't know whether it's better that he tries or better that he doesn't.
Right. It's just dismaying that there isn't somebody in the job who has some sense of his place in the world stage.
It's one of those things where people say, look at all the time he's playing golf. And I think to myself, thank God.
Yeah, I mean, I do hear that quite often. Again, it's what we're saying here is, it would be great if we had a competent type of president who was on the job doing things, but we don't.
Well, again, that's the target-rich environment that the Democrats will have to figure. His incompetence is as bad as the racism. His racism is as bad as the incompetence. You're going to have to deal with both.
It's a floor wax.
And, we'll see how that goes. So that's my summary for today. Are you here tomorrow?
I think we will not be here tomorrow because of the construction going on, and then it will be a different disruption for the rest of the week. So,
all right. And
I'm
Monday?
afraid we won't be. Monday is up in the air. It's looking better that we may be back. Originally, it was going to be a long weekend away, and our plans are changing as we speak. Maybe you can hear them changing in the background.
Yeah, no, that's the market.
Okay.
I just heard a crash. It's now 465.
That's about like how our plans are going. So, yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right. Well, it's up in the air. I will, I'll sort of tell you at some point. And then you can turn on the radio and say, did he say today's date? All right. It must be.
Well, it's an easy situation for me. I call in and you're either there or you're not.
Yeah, right. You'll see what happens.
And we'll see what happens.
It's a very tough situation. I hope it works out for the radio, by the way.
Yeah, exactly right. So, take care, and I'll talk to you at some point in the future, as yet unspecified, in an undisclosed location. Take care, and enjoy the show, folks, for the rest of the hour and 15 minutes that you and David get a chance to spend some intimate time together. Take care, and I'll talk to you whenever.
Okay, thank you. You're getting me in trouble, it sounds like. Okay. Man, as I said at the outset of the show, there are many things happening. Some of them were just discussed. Some of the other ones are waiting discussion. So let's see what we've got here. There are so many. Let's start with something, I guess we'll start out of the blue. Just as the show began with an explanation of the nuance of Hong Kong and how maybe we shouldn't be so worried that he doesn't know what the hell's going on in Hong Kong, sort of, in a weird way. Let's go to the subject of exploding nuclear rockets over Russia. Once again, that was sort of a concerning thing that we brought up the other day. Was it Monday we discussed that? Mark Sumner, who has a bit of a scientific bent to his thinking, has some interesting background history of the nuclear rocket game, such as it is. It struck me in the way it struck many people with no background whatsoever in the situation as an odd choice to strap small nuclear reactors to large amounts of explosives and fly them around inside of the atmosphere. But it has a history. And the article we read did mention that at some point in the, relatively distant past when it comes to technology, the United States did experiment with similar designs of rockets propelled by nuclear engines, and apparently the experimentation and the theorizing on the subject was more expansive than even those articles would have led us to believe. So Mark has written this tweet thread here, which begins by saying that there are a couple of possibilities on what Russia might have done at, Arkhangelsk, which looks an awful lot like Archangel, and I guess maybe that's what they're trying to get at in their Russified way, by way of naming the place. But a couple possibilities of what the Russians may have going on here that aren't getting much attention, but which deserve a quick recap, says Mark, and then he goes ahead and gives us the recap because he's now cleared the way for it. It deserves one. Here it is. One is merely awful. The other is, well, here's some nuclear rocket history in 15 tweets. Interesting. He counted it all up. He prepared this thing ahead of time. I usually just wing it. I don't know how many tweets this is going to be. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm very Trump-like in that way. The primary thought seems to be that Russia blew up a prototype Skyfall nuclear-powered cruise missile. That's our word for it, Skyfall. I don't think they call it that, but that is that they didn't blow it up on purpose, but that's what happened, is what's the thinking is. So that's a maybe, according to Mark. Earlier this year, the head of Russia's space program announced that Russia would leapfrog U.S. space companies, or private companies, with nuclear rockets, which again, to me, sounds like a bad idea. Now, either way, it could be that Russia was testing an engine similar to the Rover/Kiwi/Nerva. That's an acronym, Nerva. Nerva nuclear rocket engine tests. These are tests that the U.S. conducted between 1955 and 1972. I wonder what NERVA stands for. I'm just sort of curious about that because, I like to look those things up. No, not that. That's leading me to a Wikipedia entry for a Roman emperor. So that's not the one not the NERVA I'm thinking of. I'm looking of the acronym. Oh, maybe I need to go to that acronym lookup. Where is that? Well, maybe if I just actually Google acronym, NERVA acronym, see what happens. There we are. Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Application. It's one of those stupid ones. It's like, yeah, all right. Okay. I mean, it's not contrived, but Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Application. Nuclear Engine for Rockets. NER. Would have been better. But NERVA, I think people like their acronyms to have 2 syllables. It's based on nothing. All right. So, either way, Mark says it could be that Russia was testing an engine similar to the Rover, not an acronym, Kiwi, or NERVA nuclear rocket engine tests that the U.S. conducted between 1955 and 1972. After all, he says, as though he knows such things, because he does, the engines began with a design explicitly aimed at being used for the upper stage of an ICBM, the acronym we all know and remember from the nuclear weapons arena, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. The U.S. tests were actually very successful and showed that nuclear thermal rocket engines were potentially far more effective than any chemical engine. In fact, the tests were so successful. How successful were they? They were so successful that the goals became increasingly ambitious. Now, as I recall, the articles sort of mentioned the U.S. tests in passing and left me with the impression, even if it was a mistaken impression, because it seemed like so dismissive. Yeah, the United States sort of ruled out the efficacy of these types of engines and didn't really discuss why. But I guess the nuanced view of it is, well, though it was clear that they were workable and effective, there were some, as we later find out in Mark's thread here, let's say political problems that stem from, I guess, the general worry about flying nuclear materials above everybody's heads, tied to things that can explode. But the U.S. approaches these things differently than the Russians do normally. So, anyway, the U.S. tests were successful, not inconclusive or dismissed out of hand. They just had the problem of being nuclear. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that worries everybody. That meant that these engines would require kilograms of radioactive material and weren't suited for in-atmosphere work, which is what would be going on if you're talking about a cruise missile. Of course, it was a different kind of cruise missile that they were discussing. It wouldn't be in atmosphere for most of its flight, but of course, going up and coming down, well, there's atmosphere involved, yes. Anyway, this didn't make them universally popular, but in space, they would have been spectacular. Seriously, Mark says. NASA had plans to mount NERVA on top of a Saturn V and go to Mars in 1978. The idea being, a traditional rocket booster puts the thing up and out of the atmosphere, and then afterwards propulsion is nuclear from that point. Okay. NERVA was even proposed to take people on the same kind of grand tour that the Voyager probes made. NASA loved NERVA, but Nixon didn't. All the N's in play here on this one. And he killed the program despite a lot of supporters in Congress. But here's the thing. A NERVA-style design was kind of hard to screw up. See, I would have thought, gee, that seems like it's such an easy thing to screw up. It turns out it's actually hard. It's not quite intrinsically safe, but it's close. So this is the sort of thing that comes out later in the movie, that the nuclear scientists were convinced that it was almost intrinsically safe, and so therefore we should definitely go ahead with it. But of course, this is a movie about recovering from the disaster that ensues, and so all the discussions about how intrinsically safe it is in hindsight look so foolish. This is the way the movie plays out. But reality might be different. The U.S. built multiples of this thing, the Nerva rockets, taking different approaches, testing them repeatedly without having to evacuate a single town. We did have more emphasis on safety, always, than the Russians seemed to do. So, what if Russia wasn't trying to do a Nerva-style craft? Because in the 1950s and 60s, there was another nuclear rocket proposal that made Nerva look like something cooked up in a product safety lab. Which means that was a good idea. Whereas the other thing might have been like, well, safety be damned, look what else we could be doing. The other project was called Orion. If NASA's plans for Nerva sound grandiose, they're child's play next to the ideas for Orion. And it wasn't so much that they sound grandiose, it's that they sounded like safety was a priority. So I'm a little worried about what's going to happen with Orion. But that's only because I've read the thread. I'll read it to you now and you'll see what I mean. Because proponents of this second kind of nuclear rocket, Orion, wanted to send a craft the size of a city block all the way to Saturn and do it in the 1960s. So by what mechanism would we get this done in the 1960s? Well, here's some of that answer before we head out into the break. The basic idea behind Orion goes back to the 1880s. How about that? When scientists, Russian scientists actually, worked out that you don't need a steady thrust to drive a rocket. You can do it with a series of explosions. Oh, and so now it's starting to become clear how maybe crazy sounding this is. Think of a Project Orion craft as having an engine, and that's in scare quotes, that's kind of like a soda machine, only instead of cans of soda, it dispenses bombs. These bombs are dropped behind the not really a rocket, where they explode and push against a large plate. It sort of works like a sail. Isn't that a great idea? To propel ourselves through space by blowing up nuclear bombs. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's figure out, let's read the rest of this Mark Sumner thread. We left off having just learned that the more crazy sounding nuclear rocket idea, if it is a rocket, that the United States thought about, conceived of in the 1950s and 60s was based on the realization by Russian scientists way back in the 1880s that I guess you figured out, like out in space, you don't need steady thrust to drive a rocket, or really anywhere, I guess. But out in space, it would work best without all the varying forces resisting the flight. You could move a craft along with a series of explosions, which, it sounds abrupt and dangerous and scary. But you wouldn't want to stand under a conventional rocket either, and it's not like a safe place to hang out under there either. It's, a no-go zone, let's say. So, all right, anyway, it's only slightly more dangerous from the individual perspective. If you're going, you'll be annihilated sitting underneath a chemical rocket. You'll be annihilated sitting under a nuclear rocket. So I guess it makes no difference in that sense. But further away, maybe it's a different thing. Anyway, so here's the deal, right? Basically, you could build a gigantic spacecraft. The size and ungainliness wouldn't matter very much considering you're operating in the, what we call the vacuum of space, which isn't exactly a vacuum, but pretty close, whatever. I don't know. I'm not an aerospace engineer, but I think we all know that things can move through space much differently than they move through the Earth's atmosphere. So basically, a Orion-type craft would drop nuclear bombs behind it and blow them up, and then the shock wave, the force of the explosion would be caught on the giant undersides, like a giant plate, a sail of sorts, that then catches that energy and moves the craft along opposite the direction of the explosion, right? I mean, pretty basic, except for the fact that, can we build something, and is it safe to propel ourselves through space with nuclear explosions? And is that a wise idea? And is it a wise idea to build a craft that carries a bunch of nuclear bombs on it in the first place? So there we are. The bigger the explosions, Mark explains, the larger and faster they can drive the craft. In the largest proposed Orion design, the vehicle would have been over a quarter of a mile wide and weighed 8 million tons. It would drive along on 1,000 3-kiloton nuclear bombs. That is pretty amazing, right? I mean, it's a very ambitious thought, but I guess when you get to the point of trying to build the thing, well, one of the more dangerous things about it is it has 1,000 nuclear bombs on it. All right, bad. But if it's all operating in space, will it be okay? I don't really know. How's it going to get there? I don't really know. Are we going to build it out in space? Maybe. I don't know. That is all not discussed here. Freeman Dyson worked out theoretical limits for Orion that suggested it might reach speeds between 10 and 30% of the speed of light. That is a lot of speed. The mass and speed potential with Orion is just fantastically far beyond anything else we know how to do. And really, I mean, as enticing as that is, I think we should wait until we know how to do things better. But, all right, they were very ambitious back then. And the goofiest thing might be, we could do this. It was mostly political concerns, specifically the 1963 test ban treaty that scotched plans on Orion. That and, the idea of running a ship on a crap ton of nuclear bombs. It bothered people. So, if Russia intends to leapfrog the U.S. by building nuclear-powered rockets, they could build systems like Nerva designs that we made in the 1960s. Or they could really go to genuinely jaw-dropping WTF-itude using a system more like Orion. And which one do you think that today's Russians would opt for? I don't know. So what happened there last week could be the explosion of a system that should be really difficult to screw up, like a good nervous system. Or I guess it could be a crappy nervous system that isn't so hard to screw up. Or it could be an explosion from a system that runs on explosions. Okay, this episode of Rocket History plus Wild Speculation is done. Thanks for tuning in. Well, I mean, I guess it's possible that they were trying something that was meant to explode its bomb propulsion system outside of the atmosphere, but accidentally I don't think they accidentally detonated a 3-kiloton nuclear explosive inside the atmosphere, and we haven't figured that part out. But I don't know. Maybe they're little bomblets. Could be little small ones. Could be just that it accidentally blew up when the regular chemical engine exploded in a funny way. Still not enough information to figure this whole thing out. But it's an interesting lesson in the history of rocket propulsion theory. Anyway, I guess it works, right? If you have something that can protect you from being destroyed in a series of nuclear explosions that happen immediately behind you, then I guess in theory that's something you could try it out over the weekend. Maybe you want to give it some thought. Maybe that's how come we're not coming back with the show. We might blow ourselves up, propelling ourselves to college on a wave of nuclear explosions. Also, I don't know, internal combustion probably seems like a better idea in hindsight, now that I think about it. Okay, other things that are happening that are super important. We mentioned, I think Greg mentioned Ken Cuccinelli clarifying his remarks about the Statue of Liberty poem yesterday by just making things that much worse by saying, well, the whole thing is, you expect this from the Trump Republicans now. Now, you misunderstand. The Statue of Liberty, the Emma Lazarus poem was talking about European people, not just people from everywhere, like S-hole countries or places like that. They meant European people. And the idea, Josh Marshall is writing about it on Twitter, saying that what's getting lost in the shuffle here, as he says, Cuccinelli is arguing that wretched in the poem, the word wretched, refuse, right, didn't mean really wretched. He appears to be saying it referred to people who weren't part of the nobility or simply one of the lower classes and commoners. Not wretched, pretty good. Skilled white workers from Europe is what it really meant, not just anybody who wants to be free, even if they're really gross and yucky. Wow. So they just say it out loud now, and I guess this surprised people at CNN who are interviewing him, but it shouldn't surprise probably won't surprise a lot of Virginians, although quite honestly, even here in Virginia, not a whole lot of people are aware of Ken Cuccinelli and who he is, which is why he was able to ride Republican coattails into the AG job, Attorney General job, that one time, but never was able to. Once he was the focus of the election, there was no way he was going to step up and become governor. People were not going to let that happen. In Virginia, well, in a lot of states, actually, when you have someone running for governor and they don't, in states where they don't appoint lieutenant governors or attorneys general, but rather elect them, very often voters don't pay a whole lot of attention to who's running for lieutenant governor or for attorney general, and they just sort of vote as a slate. So if the Republican candidate for governor is swept into office on whatever, whether a wave election or otherwise, they generally tend to bring their choice of lieutenant governor and attorney general along with them, because there's just not much campaigning by comparison that gets done for those jobs, and people just think of them as a team. I would basically say that Ken Cuccinelli's election as Attorney General means almost nothing in terms of his actual electoral popularity statewide in Virginia, but you could be forgiven for thinking that that's the case, even if you are that person and you know how things actually work. Because people tend to give themselves the benefit of the doubt. Everyone had to vote. In reality, they affirmatively voted for me to be Attorney General. So there's no arguing with that. It's just the reality of the reality is that most people don't really understand or care that much who they're pulling the lever for. That's actually quite a dangerous situation and probably ought to be fixed, except that also here in Virginia, you're only allowed one term in office as governor, and you get 4 years, one term. And so people also tend to think of these races as, well, how bad could it be? Even if they're horrible, they're automatically out in 4 years. So I think we can survive almost anything. That was before Donald Trump became president of the United States. And of course, there are still people all over Virginia who think that was a good idea. I think you get the picture here. So anyway, I just wanted to bring you up to date that, they're just saying it out loud now. And Ken Cuccinelli is the culprit on this one. Okay. Other items up for consideration. Let's go with one of the more serious and impactful and I think insightful that is being circulated. ABC News has a story by Mike Levine that I just saw not long ago, the Daily Kos Twitter account tweeting it out, so it must be that it has published recently on the front page coverage of this story. Here's the headline. In scare quotes, no blame, ? Then the rest of the regular headline. ABC News finds 36 cases invoking Trump, that also in quotes, in connection with violence, threats, and alleged assaults. That's not the clearest headline in the world, but in case you have any doubt about what it is about or haven't seen the discussion about it on Twitter, We'll read you the article, and that ought to clear things up. President Donald Trump has repeatedly refused to accept any responsibility for inciting violence in American communities, dismissing critics who have pointed to his rhetoric as a potential source of inspiration for some citizens acting on even long-held beliefs of bigotry and hate. I think my rhetoric brings people together, he said last week, which is an amazingly stupid thing to say. 4 days after a 21-year-old allegedly posted an anti-immigrant screed, better use of the word again, online, and then allegedly opened fire at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. He definitely did do this, I think, killing 22 and injuring dozens of others. But the legal department says you have to say allegedly. But a nationwide review conducted by ABC News has identified at least 36 criminal cases where Trump was invoked in direct connection with violent acts, threats of violence, or allegations of assault. In 9 cases, perpetrators hailed Trump. Remember, I'm thinking of Richard Spencer at his speech saying, "Hail Trump, hail our country," or whatever the hell it was. He was giving the Nazi salute, etc. In 9 cases, perpetrators hailed Trump in the midst or immediate aftermath of physically attacking innocent victims. In another 10 cases, perpetrators cheered or defended Trump while taunting or threatening others. And in another 10 cases, Trump and his rhetoric were cited in court to explain a defendant's violent or threatening behavior. This has been a trend of late, too. I've seen a couple of stories where people are saying they're pleading in court, "I'm not guilty because the president said I should do this." People who think they're acting on his direct orders. In some cases. 7 cases involved violent or threatening acts perpetrated in defiance of Trump, with many of them targeting Trump's allies in Congress. But the vast majority of the cases, 29 of the 36, reflect someone echoing presidential rhetoric, not protesting it. ABC News could not find a single criminal case filed in federal or state court where an act of violence or threat was made in the name of President Barack Obama or President George W. Bush. I mean, minus the Iraq War. The 36 cases identified by ABC News are remarkable in that a link to the president is captured in court documents and police statements under the penalty of perjury or contempt. In many cases of assault or threat, charges are never filed, perpetrators are never identified, or the incident is never even reported to authorities. And most criminal acts committed by Trump supporters or his detractors have nothing to do with the president. But in 36 cases, court records and police reports indicated some sort of link. The perpetrators and suspects identified in the 36 cases are mostly white men, as young as teenagers and as old as 75, while the victims largely represent an array of minority groups, African Americans, Latinos, Muslims, and gay men. Federal law enforcement authorities have privately told ABC News they worry that even with Trump's public denunciations of violence, such as they may be, Trump's style could inspire violence-prone individuals to take action against minorities or others they perceive to be against the president's agenda. Any public figure could have the effect of inspiring people, FBI Director Chris Wray told a Senate panel in July. But remember that the people who commit hate-fueled violence are not logical, rational people. While asserting that fake, in quotes, media coverage is exacerbating divisions in the country, Trump has noted that a fan of Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders opened fire on Republican lawmakers playing baseball in a Washington suburb 2 years ago. Nobody puts Bernie Sanders in the headline with the maniac, Trump said last year. And last week, Trump similarly insisted that the man who fatally shot 9 people in Dayton, Ohio 3 days earlier supported, and that in quotes too, Sanders and other liberal causes. But there's no indication either of those shooters mentioned Sanders while launching their attacks, and no charges were ever filed because both were fatally shot during their assaults. So I guess we never find out. In identifying the 36 Trump-related cases, ABC News excluded incidents of vandalism. ABC News also excluded several cases of violence from attacks on anti-Trump protesters at Trump rallies to certain assaults on people wearing Make America Great Again hats that did not establish explicit ties to Trump. In conducting its review, ABC News did find several cases where pro-Trump defendants were charged with targeting minorities, or where speculation online suggested that the defendants were motivated by Trump. But in those cases, ABC News found no police records, court proceedings, or other direct evidence presenting a definitive link to the president. So those cases also excluded from the ABC News tally. Nevertheless, last year, Trump said he deserves no blame for what he called the hatred seemingly coursing through parts of the country. And he told reporters that he's committed to doing everything in his power not to let political violence take root in America. The White House, by the way, did not respond to a request for comment sought for this report. So I guess then a cataloging of some of these crimes, I don't know whether our time is best spent on these things or just in general on the storyline itself. That there are these 36 cases, even excluding the other things that might otherwise be tied to Trump, but just 36 cases in which there's an explicit mention somewhere in the proceedings of Trump being at the heart of the motivation for the crime, which is a rare thing. It doesn't happen with other presidents. So here's a couple of them here. Let's see. There's the 36 cases involved are August 19th, 2015. In Boston, after he and his brother beat a sleeping homeless man of Mexican descent with a metal pole, Stephen Leader, I guess L-E-A-D-R, letter perhaps, 30 years old, told police Donald Trump was right. All these illegals need to be deported. That's a quote. The victim, however, was not in the United States illegally. The brothers, who are white, ultimately pleaded guilty to several assault-related charges and were sentenced to at least 2 years in prison. That's 2015. December of 2015, after Penn State University student Nicholas Tavalia, 19, was charged with an ethnic intimidation charge and other crimes for threatening to put a bullet in a young Indian man on campus, his attorney argued in court that Tavalia was just motivated by a love of country, not hate. It wasn't hate. I mean, it was my love of my country, which is full of hate. Donald Trump is running for president of the United States, saying that we've got to check people out more closely. Tavalia's attorney argued in his defense. Tavalia, who is white, ultimately pleaded guilty to ethnic intimidation and was sentenced to up to 2 years in prison. So I guess that didn't work very well. April of 2016, when FBI agents arrested 61-year-old John Martin Roos in White City, Oregon, that's the real name of it, for threatening federal officials, including then-President Barack Obama, they found several pipe bombs and guns in his home. In the 3 months before his arrest, Roos posted at least 34 messages to Twitter about Trump, repeatedly threatening African Americans, Muslims, Mexican immigrants, and the, quote, liberal media. And in court documents, prosecutors noted that the avowed Trump supporter posted his threatening messages to Facebook a month earlier. Quote, the establishment is trying to steal the election from Trump. Obama is already on a kill list. Your name can be there too. Roos, who is white, has since pleaded guilty to possessing an unregistered explosive device and posting internet threats against federal officials, sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. It goes on. I mean, you get the idea. And there are 36 of them, and I don't know what to tell you. So these are the ones, essentially, that make explicit mention. Shall we read one that goes the other way? There's a January 3rd, 2017 item from Chicago. Everyone loves Chicago, right? 4 young African Americans, sisters Brittany and Tanisha Covington, Jordan Hill, and Tesfaye Cooper, tied up a white mentally disabled man and assaulted him, forcing him to recite the phrases, with the actual words involved, F Donald Trump and F white people, while they broadcast the attack online. Each of them ultimately pleaded guilty to committing a hate crime and other charges, and 3 of them were sentenced to several years in prison. I don't know what happened to the 4th, but there you got it. So, there were such incidents on the other side, but 30 or so were pro-Trump, and that's kind of worrying. It's an interesting statistic, to say the least. And, of course, coupled with the fact that that's never happened before for any other president, or at least didn't happen in the documents that were searched looking for invocations of Barack Obama or George W. Bush, nothing turned up. All right, just sort of an interesting note, just to keep track of the trends out there and things that are happening in the collapse of Western civilization. All right, let's see. Another couple of quick notes here. I saw noted by CNN and Manu Raju, Jeremy Diamond, and Pamela Brown reporting that Trump appears to be backing off plans. Did we mention this? It was planned for mention earlier in the month. Trump appears to be backing off plans to commute Blagojevich's sentence. Rod Blagojevich, remember him, after pushback from Illinois Republicans. A couple of days ago, this was being floated as an idea by the Trump administration, and it struck me as one of the most absurd things he's done, and he's done some absurd things. He didn't actually do this one, but the story that we were hearing was that, of course, because it's so absurd, Jared Kushner was involved. That Jared Kushner was among the people pushing him to consider commuting Rod Blagojevich's sentence. And there were several people doing it because they thought that, or they purported to believe. They purportedly believed. I don't know that that doing so would be a matter of fairness. That Blagojevich was somehow over sentenced for what he had done, which was a little worrying because, of course, it was, naked corruption. And our big worry about this administration is also naked corruption. And it's worrying that people who are close to or perhaps in themselves involved in naked corruption were openly lobbying for essentially, well, not pardoning, but for commuting the sentence of people involved in naked corruption. And it seemed like maybe a setup for pardoning themselves in their own naked corruption. So that worried people a little bit. But perhaps the only thing dumber than that was the idea that was reportedly being attributed to Jared Kushner, who, of course, has his own connection to naked corruption, not only his own, but his father's. That he was pushing the idea that, well, you see, Rod Blagojevich was a Democrat in office, and so Democrats will think you're being, helpful and fair to them if you pardon one of theirs along with all the other people that you've pardoned or commuted sentences for on your, among the ranks of Republicans. And they'll say, see, well, it's for both sides, or he's not being unfair about these things. He's doing it for everybody, Republicans and Democrats alike. Jared Kushner reportedly genuinely believed that Democrats were clamoring for commuting Blagojevich's sentence, and that they would be grateful to have this done, and it would buy them political capital, which is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And that's really saying something. Well, anyway, he's backing off. Can you believe it? Says here in the CNN report, Trump was on the cusp of commuting former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich's sentence late last week, multiple sources said. But then Republican members of Illinois' congressional delegation began flooding the White House with calls. And you know how he's susceptible to phone calls. Donald Trump can be swayed by talking. And usually, you just got to hope you're the last one in there to see him. Several Republican lawmakers called acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. I'm sorry, I meant to say acting Chief of Staff. Yes, Mick Mulvaney. And White House counsel Pat Cipollone. I know we've been over this, right? Cipollone. Anyway, this according to sources who spoke to CNN. And the Republican members of Illinois' congressional delegation issued a joint statement opposing the move. At least two of them, Representatives Darren LaHood and Mike Bost, perhaps B-O-S-T, made their case directly to the president on Thursday night, urging him not to go forward. They laid out the litany of crimes Blagojevich committed while in office and argued it would send the wrong message to voters about corruption by public officials. This was what I thought was the case at its most simple, on its face, how it would be regarded. And apparently this was a revelation to Donald Trump. Trump's response, "I wish I had the perspective before," according to Bost, who served on the Illinois House Impeachment Committee that removed Blagojevich from office in 2009. "I wish I'd heard some of this before." Why were you talking about commuting his sentence if you hadn't heard this before? Because you're woefully unprepared for everything and you do everything by the seat of your gigantic pants. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just trying to grab a few more items for consideration in the show. Don't know whether we're really going to be able to fit those things in, and don't want to cut off the flow on Twitter in case something new and exciting happens. But let's continue with the CNN coverage of Trump's reversal and his train of thought, his the little engine that could, if you will, except it couldn't. So I guess that whole thing goes out the window. All right. Anyway, so basically what happens is he's considering commuting his sentence without any knowledge of what he had been sentenced for. And when Republicans, particularly one who participated in his impeachment in Illinois, actually spoke to him, he's like, "Oh, I didn't realize that they were bad." Yeah, those charges were so outrageously bad, Bost says, about his conversation with the president. That same evening, LaHood, a former federal and state prosecutor, called Trump as well and laid out in detail the brazen charges against Blagojevich, including allegations he threatened to cancel millions in state dollars for a children's hospital if its CEO did not write him a $25,000 campaign check. Among the charges was that Blagojevich attempted to sell former President Barack Obama's Senate seat that he resigned in order to become president. And Trump was informed on the call that Blagojevich, whom Trump knew from his role on Celebrity Apprentice, didn't offer any remorse for his crimes, sources said. So just time out for a second. One, Trump doesn't have any idea that he did any of these things and what the charges were. All I know is he was on Celebrity Apprentice and he seemed like a pretty good guy, so maybe they must have overdone it on him, that he's in jail for so long. What could it be? He's such a nice guy. Two, I'm not 100% certain that Donald Trump understood intrinsically what was wrong with threatening to cancel millions in state dollars for a children's hospital if the CEO didn't write him a campaign check. Donald Trump would do that and would think that was being smart. I don't pay taxes, that makes me smart. I extort money from people, that makes me smart. I don't know that he got that, but okay. Anyway, it's LaHood's opinion that he got through to the president with these ideas. Okay, so by the way, he also said, he didn't even offer any remorse for his crimes. I don't know whether that means anything to the president either. I think this would have real ramifications, said LaHood, who also spoke to Cipollone about the matter. We're trying to send a message that this type of public corruption is terrible for Illinois. Oh, is that it? Okay. Well, then maybe that's a bad idea. The White House official downplayed the idea anything had changed, though, insisting that there is no pumping the brakes on Blagojevich and that Trump is still looking at a handful of possible pardons and commutations, maybe still including Blagojevich. The New York Times first reported that Trump was having second thoughts about commuting Blagojevich's sentence. Another White House official said that while Blagojevich's pardon seemed imminent, I don't know whether it's pardon or commutation still, it's both, I guess, could be either one. While it seemed imminent late last week, there had been no movement on the matter since Trump spoke with the two congressmen. It appeared to be on ice, the official said, while offering the caveat that Trump could change his mind and to decide to move forward. The calls from the congressman came after Trump told reporters Wednesday night aboard Air Force One that he was, quote, thinking about commuting his sentence very strongly. That statement led to the Republican members of Illinois' congressional delegation's statement opposing the action, similar to the one they issued in 2018 when Trump first floated the commutation and prompted LaHood and Bost's calls to Trump. I think it's enough. 7 years, Trump said, referring to the years Blagojevich had served out of his 14-year sentence. Trump's comments were the culmination of several months of work at the White House to prepare for the president to commute the sentence. The White House counsel's office had been analyzing Blagojevich's case in recent months, and his file had been, quote, vetted significantly, a senior administration official said. Of course, nothing gets vetted there, so that's a lie. Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, had been funneling messages of support for Blagojevich's commutation to the president, two sources said, and the disgraced governor's wife had also taken her appeals for a commutation directly to Trump through appearances on Fox News. That's to be expected. The Kushner thing just doesn't make any sense. Trump advisor and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani also made it clear to Trump that Blagojevich's sentence was too harsh. It was only after his calls with LaHood and Bost that Trump softened his stance, tweeting simply that, quote, many people have asked that I study the possibility of commuting his, parentheses, Blagojevich's, he actually says that, I think, sentence, in that it was a very severe one, and that his staff was, quote, continuing the review of this matter. Multiple sources familiar with the calls said Trump and Mulvaney both did not seem aware of the details of Blagojevich's case. Vetting very strongly. All that vetting going on. All right. They actually weren't aware of the details of the case, even though the president had decried the former governor as being treated unbelievably unfairly, which is the sort of thing normally you would think somebody would only say if they were actually familiar, even in passing, with the details of the case. But not Trump. Bost said that while Trump, quote, saw a sentence that didn't meet the crime, he did express he wished he had the perspective earlier after speaking with Bost. In other words, he feels like now he's made a fool out of himself, which may unfortunately be the biggest driver in all of this. If he thinks that he's making a fool of himself by second guessing, then he'll flop back, which only makes him look like more of a fool, to the original position. The answer he gave me, he would continue to look at it, Bost said. I'm sure he said very strongly. Bernard Kerik, can you believe he's in this? A former New York Police Department commissioner who served time in prison on tax fraud convictions and has been advocating for Blagojevich. Why? Because Rudy Giuliani is. Why is Giuliani doing it? I don't know. I don't know if he's getting paid or what. Anyway, Kerik slammed the opposition to Blagojevich's commutation as, quote, just as political as the prosecution and sentencing itself. Mark Vargas, a spokesman for the Blagojevich family, told CNN late last week that the family had heard rumors of a possibly impending commutation, but said the family had not confirmed the rumors and was in a holding pattern. This week, Vargas said he had no update on any movement from the White House because, the dotard wants to sit around on the couch and have other people think about it. Bring it back to my attention sometime later. I don't know. He probably doesn't even do as much as that, giving instructions to remind me later. So, Comment here from Mike Musson. The only commuting Trump does is to one of his golf courses. That's probably true, too. And he may go the pardon route at this point, just because he doesn't know any. I don't know if he knows that commutations exist. I think he's signed a few, but I don't think he knows what he's doing when he does it. All right. Moving on. Other subjects, things in pocket that deserve more attention. There's been some coverage today, I noticed, both from the Washington Post and Time magazine, on an issue I thought we were pretty much like that we had settled, that it was an open and shut case for most of us who understand these things. But I guess, I don't know, there's reporting going on. So if you have been running around saying that Moscow Mitch McConnell is obviously on the take from Russian sources, just look at what he did to bring all that Russian investment to the aluminum plant in Kentucky, and you've been pretty sure that you're right about that. Did you know that there was now you'll be excited to know that there's reporting that backs that up, which really I kind of thought was already out there. But the fact that it's being run in two major outlets today makes me wonder whether, did I read just, I guess we must have read speculative pieces outlining, connecting the dots in a different way somehow than is being done here. Here's the Washington Post piece. How a McConnell-backed effort to lift Russian sanctions boosted a Kentucky project. I kind of think it happened in the way we thought it happened, but let's see if it happened any differently. Tom Hamburger and Rosalind Helderman teaming up for this piece from yesterday, but filed late, so you can't be blamed for not knowing it yesterday. Filed at 11:28 p.m., for crying out loud. In January, as the Senate debated whether to permit the Trump administration to lift sanctions on Russia's largest aluminum producer, two men with millions of dollars riding on the outcome met for dinner in a restaurant in Zurich. On one side of the table sat the head of sales for Rusal, the Russian aluminum producer that would benefit most immediately from the favorable Senate vote. The U.S. government had sanctioned Rusal as part of a campaign to punish Russia for malign activity around the globe, including attempts to sway the 2016 presidential election. On the other side sat Craig Bochard, an American entrepreneur who had gained favor with officials in Kentucky, the home state of Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell. Bochard was trying to build the first new aluminum rolling mill in the United States in nearly 4 decades, in a corner of northeastern Kentucky ravaged by job losses and the opioid epidemic, a project that stood to benefit enormously if Rusal were able to get involved. The men did not discuss the Senate debate that night at dinner, Bochard said in an interview, describing it as an amicable introductory chat, which happens in Zurich all the time, I guess. But the timing of their meeting shows how much a major venture in McConnell's home state had riding on the Democratic-backed effort in January to keep sanctions in place. By the next day, McConnell had successfully blocked the bill despite the defection of 11 Republicans. Within weeks, the U.S. government had formally lifted sanctions on Rusal, citing a deal with the company that reduced the ownership interest of its Kremlin-linked founder, Oleg Deripaska, who couldn't possibly be getting compensated in any other way in Russia. And 3 months later, Rusal announced plans for an extraordinary partnership with Bochard's company, providing $200 million in capital to buy a 40% stake in the new aluminum plant in Ashland, Kentucky, a project heralded by Governor Matt Bevin, Republican of course, as significant as any economic deal ever made in the history of Kentucky. And it probably is. A spokesman for McConnell said the majority leader did not know that Bochard had hopes of a deal with Rusal at the time McConnell led the Senate effort to end the sanctions, citing the recommendation of Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. McConnell was not aware of any potential Russian investor before the vote. Spokesman David Popp said, they'll surprise you every time, those Russians, huh? Bochard said no one from his company, Brady Industries, with an I in there, Braidy. No one from his company, Brady Industries, told anyone in the U.S. government that lifting sanctions could help advance the project. It's a big surprise to everybody. Rusol's parent company, EN Plus, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but that's the name, said in a statement that the Kentucky project played no role in the company's vigorous lobbying campaign to persuade U.S. officials to do away with sanctions. But critics said the timing is disturbing. It is shocking how blatantly transactional this arrangement looks, said Michael McFaul, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Russia during the Obama administration and now teaches at Stanford University. Democratic senators have called for a government review of the deal, prompting a Rusal executive in Moscow last week to threaten to pull out of the investment. The Rusal-backed project is one of several issues fueling broader scrutiny of McConnell's posture toward Russia and its efforts to manipulate American voters. In 2016, McConnell privately expressed skepticism about the intelligence reports on Russia's activities in the election and resisted a push by the Obama administration to issue a bipartisan statement condemning the Kremlin. Last month, he blocked consideration of election security bills that have bipartisan support, despite warnings from the FBI and the intelligence community about the risks of foreign interference in the 2020 election. Democrats have accused McConnell of being unwilling to stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin, taunting him with the moniker Moscow Mitch. The critique has drawn an angry response from the usually understated majority leader. I was called unpatriotic, un-American, and essentially treasonous. That's true. By a couple of left-wing pundits on the basis of bold-faced lies, McConnell said late last month. I was accused of aiding and abetting the very man I've singled out as our adversary and opposed for nearly 20 years, Vladimir Putin. A McConnell aide declined Tuesday to discuss discussions that occurred in a classified setting in 2016, but noted that the senator signed a bipartisan letter that fall requested by the Obama administration that warned state election officials about the risks of cyber attacks and urged them to be especially vigilant as Election Day approached. McConnell has since said that he supports efforts to improve election security and has budgeted more money for the effort, but does not agree with proposals that would give federal control over election issues that traditionally have been handled by states. States' rights again. I see. The controversy shows how Russia's surreptitious 2016 activities, rather than unite U.S. officials, have left Democrats and Republicans bitterly divided and have triggered heated debate about Russian investments in American businesses. You just can't be so picky, said Bochard, who sold a Midwestern steel company he previously owned to another Russian firm. He now says politics shouldn't get in the way of a good deal for Kentucky. Whoever is going to help us go in and rebuild this place that's been decimated, we just welcome it with open arms, even if it's foreign influencers. But in Kentucky, some leaders are questioning the wisdom of partnering with a Russian company recently punished by the U.S. government. Rusal is not okay, said Kelly Flood, a Democratic state legislator from Lexington, who said she regrets a 2017 vote to invest $15 million of state taxpayer money in the project. It's not okay that we're turning to Deripaska, given the damage he's done to our democracy. Rusal's reputation is now ours. You own it. A lawyer for Deripaska did not respond to a request for comment. He has denied being beholden to the Kremlin. While I realize I've involuntarily become a lightning rod for the anger some Americans have about the election result, they need to look elsewhere for a scapegoat. Deripaska told the Washington Post in February, I am nobody's man in Russia, the U.S., or anywhere else, for that matter. In Ashland, a city of 22,000 wedged along Kentucky's border with West Virginia and Ohio, there has been enthusiasm for the Brady Industries project. Oh, okay, right. What did it? We have
enthusiasm.
Right, okay, for it. So that's good. A venture the company says will bring as many as 650 new high-paying jobs to a region hit hard by the impending closure of a major steel mill and the decline of coal mining. We're supposed to bring the coal jobs back, but people won't mind. if they have aluminum mill jobs instead. Bochard said the idea for the mill was his brainstorm, a new environmentally friendly, low-cost, non-union facility that will roll sheets of lightweight aluminum that are increasingly in demand to build cars and airplanes. He said he was leaning toward building the mill in Indiana until an hours-long meeting with Bevin in March 2017 persuaded him to give Kentucky a closer look. Bevin got the state legislature to agree in the waning hours of their 2017 annual session to make a $15 million equity investment in the Brady project. That's the vote that the Democratic legislator says she now regrets. That's skin in the game. That means the state is behind you, Bochard says. It's money in my pocket is what that really means. Flood said lawmakers were informed of the governor's proposal at 9 one night as they raced to meet a midnight deadline. She said lawmakers were only told that the appropriation was needed to create jobs in hard-hit Appalachia, but not how the money would be invested. Well, under those circumstances, the bill passed unanimously. Bevin, who in his bid for re-election is blasting Democrats as socialists, has fielded criticism that he steered the government to buy stock in a private company. This is a handout. This is a giveaway, said Jim Watson of the Bluegrass Institute for Public Policy Positions, a free market think tank. He said he understood the desire to create jobs in a hard-hit region. Some impact studies showed the mill could indirectly result in thousands of new jobs, but Watson added, I think the excitement of that overrode some of the due diligence. A spokeswoman for Bevin did not respond to requests for comment. State officials have said the investment will make Kentucky more competitive to attract high-wage, high-tech jobs in the future. In a 2017 radio interview, Bevin said he thought the Brady project would be transformative. That's going to be one of the best investments the state has ever made, he said. Look out for that. Early on, the Kentucky project apparently caught the attention of Rusal, which is the world's second largest aluminum producer. The top Rusal executive told Bloomberg News in an interview in June that the project was, quote, discussed long before Rusal was sanctioned. We just had to put the talks on hold after the sanctions, he added. An EN Plus spokeswoman said the early conversations about the Kentucky project were all internal. She declined to comment further. Bochard said he was talking to other possible investors for the project from the time the company first announced it would build in Kentucky in 2017, but he insisted they did not include Rusal and said that a partnership with the Russian company was not even on his radar when the Treasury Department announced sanctions about a year later in April of 2018. Not even a thought, he said. Do we believe him? The sanctions allowed the government to freeze any Rusal assets in the United States and made it illegal for Americans to do business with the company. At a groundbreaking for the mill a couple months after the sanctions were announced, Bochard and other speakers emphasized that the project would produce American-made aluminum sheets. This is what hope feels like, Bevin said at the event, according to a video posted online, adding, "We are Kentucky." What does that even mean? Of course they are. But Bochard said he encountered an unexpected problem. With aluminum ore in short supply, he was having trouble finding smelters with the capacity to produce enough raw material for his plant. He said he traveled the world meeting with Rusal's competitors, but was only able to find 60,000 tons of raw aluminum to purchase. He needed more. In late December, he said an aluminum industry consultant alerted him to a new low-carbon smelter that Rusal was building in Siberia. Bochard said he quickly concluded that the Rusal plant, set to open in 2021, could produce the aluminum Brady needed. At that point, he said he became convinced that the partnership with Rusal would be a dream deal, providing his company with much-needed capital and access to raw aluminum. But sanctions, he said, stood in the way. So I guess what the story I'm reading here is the guy decided to build a multi-million-dollar aluminum processing plant in Kentucky, but didn't have access to aluminum ore. It seems like a shortcoming for such a big investment. But they also persuaded the state to invest $15 million in a plant that didn't have any raw materials to work with. So he searched the world for somebody who could possibly give him the aluminum he needed, and he came up with one company, but they were under sanctions. What are we going to do? And then he began lobbying. At that point, he said, of course, he became convinced that the partnership would be a dream deal, but the sanctions stood in the way. Bouchard said he contacted his lawyers for advice. They were clear. He could talk to Rusal, but he could not legally conduct negotiations with the company while sanctions were in place. That same month, Treasury announced plans to lift the sanctions on Rusal, but Congress still had a chance to block the move. Bouchard said that by the time of his January meeting with the Rusal executive in Zurich, he knew the sanctions could be ending. Still, he said, he thought the final decision could be months or even years away. On the night of his dinner in Zurich, which was first reported by Time magazine, that's the other folks on the beat here, the outcome of the sanctions debate remained uncertain, with some Republicans expressing concerns about the plan. Over the meal, Bouchard said his Rusal counterpart told his Rusal counterpart, "Look, I don't know what's going to happen with sanctions. I don't know if it's a month or 10 years, but if the day comes and sanctions go away, I'd love to meet again." EN Plus declined to comment on the dinner. In April of 2018, after the poisoning of a former Russian spy in England, the United States imposed sanctions on some Russian entities, including Deripaska and his companies. Russian oligarchs and elites who profit from this corrupt system will no longer be insulated from the consequences of their government's destabilizing activities, Mnuchin said in a statement. A U.S. diplomatic cable from 2006, published by WikiLeaks, by the way, referred to Deripaska, who founded Rusal and had financial ties to Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's now jailed former campaign chairman, as among the 2 to 3 oligarchs Putin turns to on a regular basis. In announcing the new sanctions, Treasury noted that Deripaska had been investigated for money laundering and accused of threatening the lives of business rivals and having ties to organized crime. The U.S. government has not accused Deripaska of personal involvement in Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Deripaska sued the U.S. government earlier this year, alleging that the sanctions relied on false rumors and innuendo and originate from decades-old defamatory attacks by Deripaska's business competitors and have led to the utter devastation of his reputation and economic well-being. He told CNBC in March that he thought the sanctions represented the weaponizing of the financial system, and that they crushed all concept of presumption of innocence and fair process. The sanctions caused Rusal's stock price to plummet and disrupted the international aluminum market, drawing complaints from some U.S. trading partners. In December, Mnuchin said the Trump administration was prepared to lift those sanctions imposed on Deripaska's companies while keeping sanctions on Deripaska personally to restore order to the international aluminum market. Got to do that. He said Deripaska had agreed as part of the deal to reduce his ownership stake in the firms he once controlled. These entities are undergoing significant restructuring and governance changes that sever Deripaska's control and significantly diminish his ownership, Mnuchin said in the statement. If these companies fail to comply with the terms, they will face very real and swift consequences. Members of Congress were skeptical. There were too many open questions about whether Deripaska was still in control of the companies, and whether he would still control the companies, said Elliot Engel, chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. With the threat that Russia poses to the United States, to our friends and allies, to democracy around the world, Congress cannot just look the other way when the administration rushes a decision like this. With strong Republican support, the House on January 14th overwhelmingly rejected the administration plan to lift sanctions, 362 to 53. But the effort failed in the Senate, thanks in part to McConnell and strong lobbying efforts. The effort to lift sanctions was led by Lord Gregory Barker, the new British chief executive of EN Plus, and included former Senator David Vitter of Louisiana, now a lobbyist at Mercury Public Affairs, according to public lobbying records. Vitter and Mercury warned that failure to lift Rusal sanctions would, quote, open the Trump administration up to criticism for harming U.S. manufacturers and consumers. Why? We just could get some tariffs for that. Vitter was spotted in McConnell's office days before the vote. Michael Crittenden, a spokesman for Mercury, said the Brady Project categorically did not figure into the firm's sanctions lobbying. He declined to comment on whether anyone at Mercury knew there was a possibility that Rusal might invest in the project if sanctions were lifted, citing a company policy about not commenting on client matters, even though they're paid to comment to members of Congress about client matters. Just before the vote, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer warned the Senate that providing sanctions relief gives Vladimir Putin exactly what he wants. At a time that Russia continues to run rampant over international norms, to meddle in democratic elections, and to destabilize the world. McConnell called Schumer's resolution a political stunt, rejected the claims that he or others in the GOP were soft on Putin, and, well, guess what happened? At McConnell's urging, the measure was defeated on January 16th, falling 3 votes short of the required 3/5 majority needed to overcome that threatened filibuster. Wow. By the way, joining in opposition was Kentucky's junior Senator Rand Paul, who also claimed to be unaware of any possible investment from Rusal in all of this. Really amazing. The article goes on from there. Read the rest for yourself. Read the Time magazine earlier reporting on it. Just to keep up with things, I guess it always pays to get the details behind the charges, even though I feel like this is stuff we all kind of knew, but might as well be up to speed on all the latest developments. Speaking of which, do get up to speed on the latest developments here and around the world with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, hosted by Justice Putnam. And coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio, things happening all over the world, and they do a better job keeping an eye out internationally than we do. So do stay tuned for their show. Coming up next, there's
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
As a matter of fact, right off the bat, Trump's condo deal with Chinese businessmen in Indonesia is the reason he's turning a blind eye to the bloodbath, oh my, in Hong Kong. And then the EPA is hiding even more from the public than we first thought as it guts important regulations. That and much, much more from abroad and at home next.